Welcome to Impact TV, a corporate venture video series through a partnership with Impact Venture Capital and the Kaufman Fellows. Hi, I'm Jack Crawford, a founding general partner at Impact Venture Capital, and alongside my colleague from Impact, Pat Bumpus, and my co-chair from Kaufman, Alessandro Santo, we're excited to welcome to the show Dr. Yvonne Lutsch, Director of Investments at Lam Capital. Yvonne, it's great to reconnect.
Thank you, Jake. It has been a while. I'm looking very much forward to this conversation.
Okay, so I know you're a bit of a fitness fanatic like me. Are you still out there running and getting it done? Because I was going to try and convince you to start doing triathlons with me at some point.
So, well, you know that I did triathlons 25 years ago, but I'm running my next marathon actually, and I'm not prepared for that. I'm running my next marathon in October, and it's the Chicago Marathon, and I'm still fundraising for a very good cause. So, I will probably send you the link afterwards, and maybe you want to participate and support me.
Please do. Please do. I'll look at that. I will see what the weather's like in Chicago. I'm interested to see what time of year.
It's in October. It can every weather. It can be super hot. It can be super cold and windy. And I had everything already.
I try and avoid snow in the triathlons that I participate in. It's a rule of thumb by. Um, yeah, I wanted to also make sure to highlight that you're recognized by GCV as one of the 50 emerging leaders in the CVC space. So now with this tenure that you had at Bosch and now at Lam, you're becoming a bit of an industry icon in the CVC space. So congratulations for that.
I hope so. Thank you, Jake. No, and it's super exciting. It's super exciting to be recognized. I was recognized as a rising star a couple of years ago, and the next step is the emerging leader. And changing CVCs and seeing others, of course, I think that enhances my repertoire. And but I also want to mention that I got kind of lucky because this announcement and everything was kind of in between the roles. Um, and so I saw that, both colleagues from Lam, but also ex-colleagues from Bosch were also recognized, which was very, very nice to see.
Can you talk a little bit about the transition from Bosch to Lam and just sort of maybe how the organizations are a little different and how your role has changed from one organization to the other? Because there are some similarities, but I'd love to hear about the differences.
Yeah, there are some differences. So at Bosch Ventures, where I was like for 7 years, they are pretty much financially focused, more like a financial VC, of course, with some strategic relevance to the corporation. Otherwise, CVC doesn't make sense. But pretty independent. Their own fund structure, carried interest. The partners make the decision on the deals. And that's actually very different at Lam. And in the beginning, I have to say, I wasn't sure whether I should be scared or excited about it. That at Lam, we are much more strategic. We are investing off balance sheet. And we have an IC, which is corporate. But I have to tell you, this is the smoothest ICs I ever had. So there's good things about it. And because I was at Bosch before and I was with a large corporation also before, I just know about the value a entity at a corporation brings to the corporation when this entity is introducing startup innovation to the entity, to the corporate, and overcoming this non-invented here field. And we do that at Lam as well, and also in a very professional way. That means we are always very considerate. Do we do something good to the company with the additional investment in conjunction with the cooperation? That's the ideal case. Not always we have like a cooperation in place. Sometimes we have a cooperation, probably we see an opportunity further down the road, and it just makes sense to invest in the startup early and bring them to a stage where the corporation is actually willing to cooperate because the startup is more mature, because they have some early customer traction from somewhere else. And the startup and the corporate also have a chance to get known to each other, which is, I think, super important. And sometimes people are, under valuing or not valuing, the people factor, because it's a large corporate and it's a small startup, and that can be intimidating for the startup. It can be confusing for the corporate. And if they know each other already for a little while, even before they start to cooperate, and even the corporate just knows that there is the startup we have invested in and they can see them growing and succeeding, can help a lot.
Well, my guess is that your experience is helping with sort of how Lam is interacting with these startups, because what you described was not only a streamlined sort of process for developing a relationship between the startup and Lam Research, but also a streamlined investment committee process, which is, you know, pace as speed is always required when interacting with startups as these rounds of financing come together. I'm finding that most people don't know. I mean, Lam Research is a Fortune 500 company, very large company, major player in the semiconductor ecosystem, but many people don't know much about the company. Can you just provide maybe one extra level of detail about Lam for those who are less familiar with Lam Research?
Yes, and maybe it's my personality that I'm drawn to humble companies. I mean, Bosch is also relatively humble in terms of, you know, what areas they are working in. So Lam is Lam Research, and the name is already confusing. We are a tech company, right? We are not a research facility. We are around for 45 years. We actually celebrated our 40th years on the New York Stock Exchange this year. And we are one of the 5 largest semiconductor equipment manufacturers, WFEs, in the world, alongside ASML. Everyone hears about them nowadays. Applied Materials, KLA, and Tokyo Electron. So we are the 5 largest players. Lam is particularly strong in etching, deposition, and cleaning. And that means, like, whenever there is layers, you know, in a semiconductor or a memory chip, like logic and memory, that's the both areas we are very strong in. The more layers you need, the better for us. And actually, that's also one of the reasons why I thought, well, it's actually probably a good idea to join Lam, because all the semiconductor industry goes more and more into 3D integration. It all goes in the third dimension. So you need more layers. You have to stack layers on a wafer, you have to stack wafers, and that's actually where we are having a lot of expertise and where we can grow as a company as well. And we hope that we think we can grow stronger than the market because of that.
Can you talk a little bit more about Lam's sort of industry collaborations? Like, how do you collaborate or how do you work with companies, you know, major companies like TSMC, or, you know, what's your relationship with NVIDIA? You know, talk about sort of your place in the ecosystem with regard to these other major players that, you
Yeah.
know, I think are well positioned to take advantage of what's going on with this AI, you know, innovation wave and what's going on in the semiconductor industry. How do you interact with
Yes.
those
Yeah.
organizations?
So, I mean, as an equipment manufacturer, we are definitely closer to our direct customers than to the customers of our customers, right? And the big customers are also the big foundries, TSMC, Global Foundries, the 3 big um, memory players, SK, Micron, and Samsung, and a bunch of other players, of course. So we are very strong with them, helping them to develop processes that are crucial for the next generation of semiconductor development. But of course, we also have to build, and we do build relationships with their customers to have a better understanding of what will be the requirements for the Gen Plus 2 product to make ourselves, to prepare ourselves as much as we can. So it's an ecosystem play, but definitely with our direct customers, we are working very closely.
In researching and preparing for the interview with you, I was sort of looking around at what's going on between sort of CVCs and universities. We're, as a venture fund,
Mhm.
constantly paying attention to what's going on at UC Berkeley, at Stanford, and more now. There's amazing things. I'm actually down in LA now. Amazing things happening on USC's campus as it
Mhm.
relates to you know, innovation and in the semiconductor industry and beyond. I noticed a press release of activity around Lam Research and UC Berkeley,
Mhm.
looking at, you know, a combination of academia and industry collaboration. Do you know much about that that partnership and that collaboration? And should we expect more from Lam Research with other universities in the U.S.?
So I'm not in detail familiar with it because there's a specific group within Lam Research that is dealing with the university relationships. But it's definitely useful in different ways, right? There are universities who help us in, developing the next critical process steps, and we fund them. We can provide them with equipment. We also work with IMEC. We work with CEA Ledi. So we work with all these institutions, but that is less. That is more from a corporate side, less from an investment perspective. And because there's always this trade-off, right? If something is very early in university research, then probably some little piece of that innovation can be directly integrated in a Lam solution, but it's not necessarily an investable startup.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And because an investable startup, on the other hand, has to have a certain maturity to work with a corporate. So but of course we are doing both.
And so in addition to that R&D sort of collaboration with universities, let's now switch gears to talk a little bit about investments by industry sector. Our strategy, we're looking at AI applied to security and finance and digital health. Historically, you and I have talked a little bit about some of the activities at Kornami. I'll have to give you an update on, now they're preparing for shipping servers and generating first revenue this calendar year. So some exciting things happening there. But most of the world is paying attention to sort of this massive wave around AI. And thinking of it as, the internet, the iPhone, and AI may be the three major innovations of our lifetime. And you're at Lam Research incredibly well positioned with the focus on semiconductor and what you call Industry 4.0 to provide, additional capability and in effect tailwinds for what's happening with AI. Can you talk a little bit about what does Industry 4.0 mean at Lam Research and how you're positioned to take advantage of the AI wave of innovation?
So when we think about Industry 4.0 from an investment perspective, we are rather thinking about bracing ourselves and preparing ourselves as Lam Research, as the corporate, to be, digitally ready for anything that's going to happen, but also our products. And that includes, making our equipment smarter, self-aware, because everyone is also talking about the lights out fab in 2030. Fabs are today already highly automated, but usually only in cases when everything runs smoothly. But if there is maintenance, if there is unplanned downtime, then still people have to come in. And the goal is at some point this is all automated. And that's where, all in aspects of Industry 4.0, or call it maybe 5.0, I don't know, but all these aspects come together, right? The equipment has to be smart, it has to be self-aware, you have to have automation and robotics in place to do the maintenance. But also for our internal operation itself, right? AI is, and that's not necessarily Industry 4.0, but it all comes together at some point. We are utilizing AI internally to make, ourselves, our designers, and even our field technician smarter. So that's also an area we are looking at, and we did also some investments already there. But we are building very large machines, and so there's still a lot of handmade included, and doing this as proficient as possible. Of course, there's a lot of Industry 4.0 solutions capable of helping to do this, in a more, in an even more industrialized way.
Yeah, it's really helpful to hear that about sort of the industry sector focus and how you're thinking about that. Let's talk a little bit about many CVCs are figuring out unique ways to add value to the startups that they collaborate with. Let's talk a little bit about your ability to add value beyond capital. And I would imagine with the technical capability, I know about obviously your skill set, but I can't imagine the technical people that are around you and the ability to add value beyond capital with startups. Is that mostly co-development efforts with startups? Is that non-recurring engineering dollars that are supporting it in addition to investment? Is that, if a startup thinks about working with Lam Research and taking in an investment from Lam Capital, how should they think about sort of a collaboration on the technology side while still, wanting to retain the intellectual property
Yeah.
within the startup itself?
It can be anything, right? And it depends very much on what kind of startup and what the capabilities of that startup are, right? If it's an AI solution, then it's a platform we are probably integrating and we are simply becoming a customer, which is good, right? Because customers are the most important thing for startups to grow. There are cases where we are paying NRE dollars and where the startup develops a particular subsegment of their technology that is, yeah, very useful for us. In some other cases, we do JDAs to ask the startup to develop a solution that is where we are becoming then the customer. Like they become a supplier basically to us because their current solution is not exactly what we need, but a customized solution is something we would consider to acquire, to buy as a customer. There are others where we can even do like co-marketing, go-to-market agreements together, where we help the startup, to get better penetration in our customers' markets, and we also can appear, we not appear, we are delivering a better solution than without the startup. That's another case. All of it. So and there's also the case. I don't personally have a good example, but I think we are always thinking about it because, of course, our core is semi-equipment, right? And there might be a startup that has a unique process technology, and they want to build equipment. I mean, we should help them to build the equipment, right? It's not about the IP, the specific things that happens in a chamber, but like the whole apparatus around, including the vacuum and whatnot. That is something we can do very well. And it would be a waste of the investors' money to let the startup doing that by themselves and reinventing the wheel. So that's another aspect where we think we should bring and we will bring a lot of value beyond money.
I'm always impressed with your understanding of the entrepreneur's mindset. So yeah, I appreciate those comments. I think many times if you've spent 10 or 15 years working for large Fortune 500 companies, you don't understand sort of the mindset of the entrepreneur and how to sort of add value to them. And so I think you're actually well positioned to add significant value beyond capital because of your experience and interactions with startups. I know that both you and I at our organizations are big fans of deep tech. Uh,
Mm.
and we, as you probably know, and we may have talked about before, when we think about deep technology, whether it's AI chip space or networking technology or interconnect technology, we look at those with some excitement, but there's also capital intensity behind those types of businesses. Sometimes there's a longer time horizon to actually complete the hardware and software solution and actually get the company all the way to a successful exit. So we balance all that with our enthusiasm about, some of our companies have 80 issued patents and an incredible IP portfolio, right? And so they
Yeah.
can maintain a sustainable technology advantage because of that IP portfolio. What excites you? I mean, those are I guess the positives and the challenges with deep tech. What excites you about deep tech? Because you've spent your entire professional career for the most part thinking about deep tech and as it relates to sort of startups. Talk about your enthusiasm for the space.
I mean, first of all, I'm a physicist by training. So it's just what comes natural to me. I'm not a computer scientist. Of course, I did my own part of coding and in the past, but of course, nothing to compare with modern tools. I think I am so excited about deep tech because a little what you mentioned, I can understand and appreciate and acknowledge how hard it is for the entrepreneurs and how long it might take to bring an idea into like a real product and then also like in mass production. And that's a part I learned at Bosch the hard way. So understanding how hard this is, but also feeling like I probably can help them to not make every mistake. I think that's what intrigues me, because it's just a space where I feel more confident than others. Um, Even though it's, it's a harder way to make money, right? SaaS is probably, at least it looks like, if you know the right people, if you know the right matrices, it's almost like a cookie cutter thing. It's more about the idea itself, like what, where can I improve a process flow, or where can I, being a data platform or something like that. That's very different in SaaS, but I think it's about appreciating and having the patience with deep tech founders. That,
Agreed.
that makes us, special.
Hmm. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about industry sector in deep tech. We've talked a little bit about investing and adding value beyond capital. Let's talk a little bit about exits, right? Sort of the
Mhm.
end of the process. You've had some success. If I was just looking back and doing the research that our team did, it looks like around 17 investments made with 4 exits. We're from a seed stage investor standpoint, I think we've now invested in more than 40 companies, and they all started very, very early, and now we've got 2 exits so far, and we expect a couple of more in the coming year. So things are starting to heat up, but I always love hearing about success stories. Can you share one where you kind of engaged with an entrepreneurial team as an investor and then sort of, took it all the way through sort of a successful exit either at Bosch or Lam?
I have to admit, not really, because at Bosch I left before, and at Lam I started only recently, so I don't have a very personal example. But I think, one thing is, yeah, 4 out of 17 is a pretty good ratio. Partially, it might be because, as an insider, as a CVC, you can evaluate technologies probably better than others. But I have to say, it's also a big part of luck, of good luck. And, there were the 2021, 22. There were, this was high times when all the SPAC exits happened and other exits were also happening. This was definitely a time we could harvest from, and we are all hoping that these times are coming back. But I don't have. Well, I had another company at Bosch that also went public through a SPAC, but SPACs are hard, so they can be successful, but they don't have to be. But of course, it's always super exciting if you see your company going public. And the thing is, what I realized, it changes your mindset totally. Like, before, as an investor with an exit, like an acquisition, you get the money and things are done. If the company goes public, you are checking your Yahoo Finance account like 100 times a day. I don't know how healthy that is, but definitely changed your perspective.
I think we've done a little bit of research on taking companies public and looked at some credible SPAC teams out there, and clearly you have to have capable management that understands what it's like to run a public company. You have to have predictable revenues. You have to have a lot of good news coming, and I think in the right scenario it could make sense. At the opposite end of sort of exits, let's talk by stage how you're investing now.
Yeah.
Are you at this, we're at the pre-seed and seed stage level. I mean, oftentimes it's ideation and we're finding companies with a minimum viable product and maybe the beginnings of product market fit, maybe some early revenues, but not always required. And we like that because the valuations are oftentimes less than 10 million, a $10 million valuation. So our ownership interest is a little bit larger as a seed investor. How do you think about sort of check size and ownership percentage as you're
Yeah.
making investments?
Yeah. I would say ownership is less important for us. And as a CVC, there's always concerns about fiduciary duty towards the startup and conflict of interest. So it's actually, our lawyers sleep better if our ownership is lower, let's say it like that. Um, and and it's not about having control over the company. It's more about, supporting them with a check. If you also want to work with them, as I said before, we actually invest pretty stage agnostic. We would probably not invest in pre-seed because then it's it's hard for us to actually do a technical due diligence because it's so early. But we invested in a couple of stage companies where there was already a product. But we can also invest relatively late. We invested in Series B rounds before, where the company is at an inflection point where we think now they are developed enough that the partnership or a cooperation with the corporate makes sense, and then we only invest. So we are actually stage agnostic, and since we are off balance sheets, there's the good and the bad. The good is that we are totally free and agnostic of the check size, right? We don't have to be concerned about skewing a fund with a large check in one particular company, because we are at the end, not fund based, but off balance sheet based. So if we see a good reason for a large check, we can do a large check.
Regardless of the size of the check, you're always under 20% ownership. My understanding is that corporates have additional reporting requirements if they're 20% or higher. So you're always under 20%?
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Okay. And then from a co-investment standpoint, you may know that we've now been successful in co-investing with Intel and Applied Materials and Qualcomm and Zoom and a bunch of other corporates, right? Big part of our strategy is seeding these early technology companies and then finding the most relevant corporate player by industry sector and by stage. How do you think about sort of co-investments and collaborations with either other CVCs or with traditional venture capital firms?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I'm a true believer in strong syndicates, whether CVCs or VCs. And I mean, the semiconductor industry is a pretty small industry, but that's also the beauty. So, we are good friends with all the other corporate VCs in that space, whether this is Hitachi, Micron, Samsung, Qualcomm, even Applied. We are also talking to them, even though a co-investment with Applied might be a little bit more difficult, because then, it just can become messy. We are probably not very keen on that, but everything else is very valuable for us to share ideas, to share deal flow, to share opinions on investment opportunities we see. And same applies to other financial VCs who are active in this space. Again, the ecosystem is pretty small. We know each other. We do deals together. We know each other for years. And it's actually it's almost like a big family. Or we are just all from different companies, whether it's VC or CVC, almost doesn't matter.
You're very familiar with the various structures out there with these CVCs, right? Because of your network of relationships. It's been interesting from our perspective to see, Intel Capital now spinning out to become an independent VC.
Well, I think Liputan has a last say there, and I heard rumors that he actually wants to bring it back.
Okay, so changes in real time. Okay, so breaking news.
But maybe that's just gossip. I don't know. But because I mean, he's a VC, and I think he loves to have. I would not blame him. I think he would love to have Intercapital close to him.
Sure, sure. I mean, it's amazing because they've been arguably the largest and most significant, CVC in the world.
Yeah.
And so for them to go through that fundamental structure change, it was one thing for, Google Ventures to go to GV or people start to rebranding, but to bring in, outside LPs into a firm like that, it'll be interesting to see if they decide to retain it.
Yeah.
How are you structured at Lam Capital?
I mentioned already briefly. So we are one LP off balance sheet. We have a certain budget per year, but whether we are using it up or whether we are shooting over our target, all is possible. It's more opportunity driven. And as I said, since it's off balance sheet, we don't have carried interest, but in the public company, you get stock. And I'm still wondering which is better. The jury is still out there. So there's always, and if you think about it, stock in the company is a different kind of carried interest, because you make the corporate successful with this partnership with the startup. If you make the startup successful and they return a significant amount, of money. Of course, it's a small drop in a big pond, but still, it's a kind of very indirect carried interest.
Does that mean the team is more focused on sort of financial returns that drive the stock price up, or are there some mission elements or strategic elements that you're also focused
Yeah,
on?
it's more on the strategic side. The financial element is more through, if we are helping Lam to, to become a better company, to be able to create no new products groups earlier or faster or better than the competition. I think that's the biggest leverage we have inside Lam.
Yep. Okay. This video interview will be distributed out through the Kaufman Fellows channel to 900 investors around the world. It will also effectively likely be picked up by the National Venture Capital Association and that investment group, but it's also watched quite frequently by startups who want to understand a little bit more about what corporates are focused on by industry, how they can add value. So a lot of the information that we've talked about so far is highly relevant to the
Yeah,
entrepreneurs who are starting
yeah.
their companies. Can you talk a little bit about character traits and qualities of startups and of entrepreneurs specifically that you're targeting, something that draws you to them and highlights that they're relevant to Lam Research or someone that you'd like to work with?
Um, the thing is, I mean, like principally, if you are in the semiconductor space, particularly if you like a product company, like you invested in Konami, we invested in the Matrix, we invested in others. If you really do hardcore semiconductors, even though you might be a young entrepreneur with a part of technology innovation you came up with in your PhD in your academic research, that's fine, but I don't think it's sufficient. I think you need experienced people in the team. You need people who knows what it takes to bring, an idea into a real chip design, to tape it out and to bring it back from TSMC, to test it properly and to respin. And until this goes into a product to a customer, that's a long way. You rather have someone around, either in your team or an advisor you're working with very closely to guide you how to do that and also to have the right relationships. I hear this all the time, then there is this entrepreneur, and because they have connections, they get a hot lot at TSMC. And hot lot means, they don't have to wait 12 weeks for the wafers to come back. They get them in 4 weeks. And I mean, that is super, super valuable. Um, so having a strong team, and I mean, you hear this all the time as entrepreneurs, with industry experts, I think is super valuable. Both on the engineering side, on the operation side, and eventually also on the go-to-market side.
I was at dinner last night with my son, who's doing a lot on USC's campus with regard to professors in the engineering group, and another VC, and we were talking about professors starting companies. I wonder if you have a view, because to your point, sometimes you start with an innovation, but you also have to understand how to transform that innovation or idea into enterprise.
Yeah.
You may know USC has launched a Techstars program on
Mm-hmm.
their campus, and more, I think that it's going to be a blend of accepted participants of graduate students and professors who might go through that mentoring program. Do you have a view on how I don't know if there's things going on at UC Berkeley or Stanford or other universities? Do you have a view on sort of how university professors might sort of advance their ideas in enterprise, how they might get the support from all of us working in the venture ecosystem in a way that transforms their innovation into enterprise?
I mean, I have some personal experience there. I don't know how much I want to share. Um,
You want to share it all. You actually want to share it all.
there are professors that are very professory, and that's not always good. Because I think that's what I forgot to mention also for the young entrepreneur who's not a professor, who is just a grad student. If you appreciate what you don't know and ask for advice and help for the things you don't know, And also as a professor, it's more a personality thing, right? Even though you have tenure and you are doing this for many years, your idea, your technology might be exceptional because you're working on this for so many years and you get grants and whatnot. That's undoubted. But bring it to the market, making it a product, building a company, that is different. So if the professorial entrepreneur is aware of that and is willing to listen and to learn, then 100% welcome. But that's something, there is a tendency that younger people are more coachable than more experienced people. But I don't want to put people in drawers. But that's the only thing I would be just be careful about. But of course, I mean, because we are a deep tech investor, we want to see unique technology, and of course, they had all time of the world to develop this, right? So that's something we should and we are appreciating.
There's there's definitely some amazing talent with university professors, and they may be better advisory board members than they are founders in some cases.
In some cases, yes.
Yeah. And so taking advantage of the incredible amount of intellectual property that's happening on U.S. universities across the country, and there's probably happening globally, I'm just less familiar with that, is definitely an opportunity and something we're paying attention to. Let's finish by talking a little bit about what excites you most about sort of by industry sector, or about what's going to happen in the next sort of 3 to 5 years. Is there any sort of, if we at Impact Venture Capital were looking to co-invest alongside of Lam Capital in the next couple of years, what industry sectors would you point us to, or what problem set would you highlight? Is there anything that's kind of captured your attention and that you're specifically targeting in the next year or two?
So there's definitely the whole space of AI and the AI data center, and there are still many problems that are not 100% solved yet. And all comes down to efficiency and power reduction eventually. Whether this is optical interconnects, at some point optical compute. There was a first wave of optical compute a couple of years ago, and then people realized that's actually not that easy, and the positive effect you're getting by doing the matrix multiplication in the optical domain is eaten up by other disadvantages somewhere else. But I think optical compute, for example, is definitely something we should look at. On the other hand, I believe for the quantum computing, I also believe that semiconductors can have a big time there, because you can build them in a very reproducible way, and you can build a quantum computer with semiconductors, because you have to have a lot of, physical qubits to get a large enough amount of logical qubits to actually do meaningful calculations. I personally think, the quantum computing domain, but also quantum sensing, is super interesting, and we see interesting companies there. It's probably too early for us to invest in that space, because we cannot really participate there because there's not enough quantum chips produced today. 10 years that might look very, very different. But I think the whole compute ecosystem, I think, is super interesting, where we can spend more time and money. And then if you say compute, you also have to say, and I mentioned this in the beginning, it's about the 3D integration. In the past you had Moore's law, and everything becomes just smaller, 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 and you became more efficient and more powerful. I mean, people say Moore's law is over, others say it's not. In terms of shrinking in the two-dimensional space, it's actually limited because physics come into the way. But now everything grows in the third dimension. Transistors are already like FinFET. It's already a 3D structure. The next one is gate-all-around. It's even more 3D structure. Memory is stacking layer over layer over layer. And there's a lot of super, super deep tech, but interesting technology. And we call it advanced packaging, because you have to stack wafers together in a new way. You have to stack wafers of silicon together with wafers of photonics, or you do it on a chip basis, and you have to do in a meaningful way, in the most commercially viable way. So sometimes it's better to put wafer on wafer. Sometimes it's actually cheaper to put chips on wafer, because you only put the good chips on the wafer. So that's something that all this space, I think, is that's where we are probably spending the most of our time.
We all have a lot to learn from you. I love hearing your comments about high performance computing and sort of low energy consumption, and some of those areas are highly relevant to cybersecurity and building out the next wave of AI infrastructure.
Yeah.
Many people are focused on sort of applications, but there's AI infrastructure that is going to advance dramatically. And so I think your
And
experience is directly relevant there.
yes, and I'm actually also very curious and excited about, inference at the edge. People are talking about this now for 10 years, but through, the large language models, this actually becomes more and more reality. I mean, there is a lot of AI on the edge already, but it's actually, we have to do more, and we will be doing more there. So
All
it's
right,
good.
we're at the rapid fire portion of the program. I've got our last two questions for you. If you don't mind, I want to ask a couple personal questions. When I went through the Kauffman Fellows program, I may have mentioned to you that I did this thesis project on strategic planning for life, and a portion of that was researching how people start their days. What is their sort of morning routine? I'm envisioning you out, sprinting around the block, getting your run done. Can you talk?
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about how you launch your day to sort of optimize sort of results and
So,
fulfillment?
so the point is, especially back at Bosch, where we had, so many connections back to Germany, I had to be at the office at 7 a.m., groomed and showered for a video call. So, and I had to get in my 10, 20K run before. So sometimes I got up at 4:30. I'm not doing this anymore. The trick is, if you get up so early, it's still dark and you run in darkness, and later in the day you don't even realize that you did a workout already, because I think I was sleep running. So sleep running is actually a very good approach. So I love to start my day like that. And then if you're lucky, you see sunrise, and if you see a glorious sunrise, then you have achieved already most of your goals before 6 a.m.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. Last question for you. Favorite blog or podcast, anything that you're listening to that's sort of maybe out of sort of the normal lane of, the All In podcast or some of the other things that we all sort of listen to or read? Is there any sort of niche publication or something that you pay attention to quite closely that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's not actually a niche, but so I cannot listen to the All In podcast anymore, unfortunately. But it's a very personal thing. I love to listen to the Huberman Lab podcast. I love to listen to Peter Attia's The Drive, and there are a couple of other podcasts, and they are all about longevity, nutrition, running versus strength training, and I just like to, to prepare my body to be as capable as possible. So that's why I love to listen to these podcasts and better understand how my body works and how I can make the best out of it.
I've got to add that Peter Attia podcast to my playlist.
Yeah,
He
for
talks
the
about
drive.
Centurion, right? He's what does it take to live to 100 and be intellectually agile and physically agile? He talks about things like grip strength and other things that are important for just getting around. I'm fascinated by that.
And
Well,
yeah,
on behalf of Impact Venture Capital and the Kauffman Fellows, thanks to Dr. Yvonne Lutsch for spending time with us today. Thanks, Yvonne.
thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me. Bye bye.
That's a wrap.